The Cleveland Guardians may not make the playoffs in 2025, but win or lose, there are some things they should be writing down in their notebook to take into next season, including Thursday night's win.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into a Friday edition of Locked On Guardians, starting off the weekend with a big win, talking about a big win on Thursday for the Cleveland Guardians, and this is Locked On Guardians, your daily ticket inside the Guardians organization. We do it every day on the Locked On Podcast Network for the next half hour, covering your Guardians from the majors to the minors, the draft, and everything in between. It is our favorite half hour of the day. We hope it's yours as well. I'm Justin Lada, and I have been here since October of 2022. And I've been writing about the Cleveland Guardians minor league farm system since 2007, providing prospect analysis and scouting reports. And I want to thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and every day, wherever it is that you get podcasts. We love being a part of your daily routine. Check out my newsletter over at Next Year in Cleveland as well. And shout out to all the everydayers who are here with us, win or lose. And I think you all want to be a part of that win on Thursday. So let's talk about it. On today's show, we'll talk about the gap between the Triple-A and the majors, and just how big is it really? There's some interesting data that we'll talk about. We'll talk about a prospect who I know is going to be traded and will make the majors. We'll talk about the Guardians must sweep this weekend in Chicago. We'll talk about why. And then we'll start off today's show, of course, talking about the lessons the Guardians can take away from this series, this win, and really what they've been doing down the stretch here in the month of September. Before we get into all that, today's episode of Locked On Guardians is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, if you're a new customer, bet $5. If your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. All right. Boy, that was a fun one on Thursday. The Guardians have had some big wins. And, you know, the walk-off against Seattle at the end of August 29th, when they were honoring the 95 team. That was a special one, given the team they were playing, given the moment they were honoring and the comeback and how bad it started. That was pretty important, right? There's been a lot of exciting wins lately, and I know it's been a challenging year. It's been up and down, so if you've been sticking around this season to watch the roller coaster that it's been, gotta feel like Thursday night was a really big one, a really important one. No matter where this team goes the rest of the year, the days are kind of ticking off the calendar for the Guardians to make the playoffs. They're not getting a lot of help, which we'll talk about in the second segment, but there are a lot of important things the Guardians can take into next season from what they've been doing down the stretch, especially the players that are doing it. And let's start with the big guy in this game, Kayfus, a 425-foot go-ahead home run in the eighth inning. It has been a struggle for Kayfus, okay? An OPS of 500 in the month of August. You know, he was up kind of at the beginning of August. It was not a good start for him. 585 OPS and 82 plate appearances, right? Really tough. Has not hit lefties well in the majors. Now, to be fair, he hasn't faced a lot, but when he hasn't been great. He does have one home run against them, and that's really been it for him. But he's starting to have a bit of a better September. He's coming out of it a little bit. He went through a really long hitless stretch at the end of August. September, he's picked things back up, and none bigger than that home run on Thursday night. 425-foot home run. Now, John Schreiber did put the ball in Kayfus' honey hole, as Tanner Bybee would describe that. But it was a ball that was low, a fastball low, right where he likes it, and he didn't miss. That's the important thing. But it's important for guys like Kayfus this time of year and the setting that the Guardians are in to have these kind of moments from young players. We've talked about it before. Chasing the playoffs is important. It's good for development. This is the last frontier. Now, a game on September 11th against the Kansas City Royals, chasing down a final wild card spot, is not going to compare to what you're going to see in October versus the Tigers or the Yankees or the Red Sox or the Astros, whatever. That's not going to compare. But you've got to go through these things to get there first. So you've got to have these types of moments. I think it's important for guys like Kayfus. We've talked about this before with Manzardo, who was part of it last year but wasn't here the whole year. He came up in September when the Guardians, pretty much knew they were going to be in the playoffs, right? But he had some big moments in the playoffs too. But you're getting guys up in September like CJ Kayfus who are they're finally going through that transition period, right? It was a struggle. And we know that the gap from the majors and the minors is there. We'll talk about that in the third segment today. We knew he was going to struggle. We knew that CJ Kayfus had issues with chasing a little bit. We knew he struggled with good velocity. There was some breaking stuff that was an issue. But he's coming out on the other side of it right now with a good September, and he had a home run in an important game. The Guardians are chasing down a playoff spot. The clubhouse is into it. The guys are into it. They're trying to run this down. They're not quitting, giving up in the season. So kudos to them, right? They're playing good baseball right now, minus some of the frustrating mistakes on Wednesday night. But this is the kind of thing that you want to be able to take into next year or even the rest of the year. When you have these kind of moments, CJ Kayfus said this was the best moment. It felt great. It's the best feeling in the world. I'm sure until he hits one of these in October and it's a walk-off and not a go-ahead in the 8th. But these are the things you take with you. You look back on this moment, how you handled yourself in that at-bat, in that situation, right? In the 8th inning, the Guardians couldn't do a whole lot offensively. It's a game they had to win. It's late in the year. Kayfus has struggled. And he went out and hit that big home run at a huge moment for them. That is something you put in your back pocket. And you can't guarantee it's going to carry over to next year. You can't guarantee that, well, just because he did this or he's having a better September means he's not going to struggle next year, because the league's going to adjust to CJ Kayfus. And he is going to struggle next year, no matter if he starts in the majors or the minors. But these are things you can have in your mental notebook, in your back pocket, and you can say, okay, this is how I handled this situation before. This is how I've been pitched before. These are really good building blocks moments. And that's something I've learned in therapy too, is how you can kind of stack good things and go back. A lot of things get easier over time when you do them repetitively, building that confidence. Part of building confidence is doing the thing, doing the hard thing over and over and building towards something and remembering how you did it the last time, because your brain stores that kind of information. It says, this is based on a past experience. This is how we handled it before. And you can adjust, or you can at least draw on that success or look at the failures and know what not to do. And CJ Kayfus gets that benefit by doing this, right? That's really huge for him. And we've seen it with guys like Parker Messick this season. The league is going to adjust to Parker Messick next year, and he's going to have to improve too, but he's had a really nice start to his career as well. And I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Gavin Williams, because even though Gavin Williams has more experience, right? He's been in the league a little bit longer. This is his 3rd full season, and it's been his best season by far, but he's still learning a lot of things, okay? Gavin Williams gave up that 2-run homer in the 1st inning. He threw almost 30 pitches. He was not sharp at all. It was tough, and the Guardians have not done well getting behind the 8 ball this season, especially lately. But he rebounded, didn't give up a run the rest of the way, right? Had a couple of walks, had a couple hits, and the Royals did hit him hard, and it's fair that, the Royals offense is barely any better than the Guardians, if at all. But you still got to play the game, and Gavin Williams is really fighting himself a lot in this start, especially with his command. And we've seen these starts before with Gavin Williams, where he comes out in the 1st inning, doesn't have good control, gets hit hard, and then all of a sudden, it's the 3rd inning, it's out of the game. And the Guardians do not win this game if Gavin Williams does not get himself to the 6th inning, okay? Because you bring in Matt Festa a little earlier. You might see Colby Allard. Maybe you see Zach Kent. You're not, they did, Matt Festa was fine, but you don't want to bring him out too early or as a guy you're trying to keep things close with and clean things up. Maybe you would have seen Junis again. I don't know, threw 19 pitches the other night. My point is, though, you probably don't get to that back end of the bullpen. You probably don't get keeping things at a 2-run deficit if Gavin Williams doesn't rebound from that ugly 1st inning. It didn't snowball on him in the 1st inning. He got out of it, and then it didn't affect him the rest of the game. He went out and pitched his game from there. And he actually had a pretty good game, 13 swings and misses, right? 1st inning was not pretty by any means, but he went out and he dominated. His sweeper was fantastic. He didn't rely on the 4-seam too much. He threw a lot of curveballs. Really good pitch mix, really good game calling after the 1st inning. Thankfully, the Guardians offense was able to come back and back him. CJ Kayfus, thank you. Bo Naylor, thank you for the home run in front of CJ Kayfus. I know we've been kind of on the negative train for Bo Naylor lately, but he had 2 hits, almost a home run, and he had the hit in front of Kayfus that made it a go-ahead home run. Manzardo, a huge hit in this game, too, hit the ball hard. But Gavin Williams getting the 6th inning, this game doesn't get where it does without him. And that's something he's learning, too. He's taking that with him, hopefully, into the future. We'll see. All right, the Guardians have Chicago this weekend against the White Sox, and I don't think it is any stretch to say that they absolutely have to sweep the series. We'll talk about why on the rest of today's Locked On Guardians. All right, as somebody in their mid-30s who wears a lot of hats, hair loss is something I get concerned about. My dad lost a lot of hair at the end. We've all seen a lot of ads out there for hair growth products, and we're like, yeah, I'm sure that really works, right? There's so many products out there, so it's really hard to know which ones are going to do anything. I don't really know either. But I think that's why you should give Nutrafol a look, because it is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand. It is trusted by over 1.5 million people. So they're all getting it right. That's a lot of people. That's enough for me if it's working for them. It's not just hype. That is a clinically tested supplement that targets the root cause of thinning and shedding hair with a proactive approach. And again, if you're someone who is my age, and I have friends that are losing hair, and luckily I am not, but I wear a lot of hats. And again, my dad lost a lot of hair, and I am getting in my mid-30s, so it's something I have to watch out for. So when I do, keep an eye on that. I am going to check with Nutrafol to see thicker, stronger hair and less shedding within 3 to 6 weeks with Nutrafol. Limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners of Locked On MLB $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com. Enter the promo code Locked On MLB. That's Nutrafol.com. Promo code Locked On MLB. Once again, thank you for being here with us on Locked On Guardians every single day. We love being part of your daily routine, and we hope you are making us your first listen wherever you get podcasts. We are proud of that. Shout out to all the everydayers. Shout out to all the insiders. You got special love in our heart for being with us and sticking through it with thick and thin. If you'd like to be an everydayer, it's really easy. All you got to do is automatically download the podcast to your audio platforms. Wherever you get podcasts, we're on everything. And if we're not, let us know. I'm sure we can get on there. Or hit the bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode on YouTube. And you can get things like the MLB Squad Show, which I thought was going to be back this week, but it's back next week. So you'll get that back next week if you're into that. You'll also get notifications when we go live or when we post reaction videos to games, news, all that kind of stuff. So plenty of ways for you to make sure you never miss out on any content that we deliver. And we appreciate everybody who likes that content. All right. I don't think this is a big hyperbole to say. Given the time of year, given the situation, the Guardians absolutely have to sweep the White Sox this weekend. I don't think there's any other way around it. It doesn't guarantee the Guardians will make the playoffs by any means because they need help. And we'll talk about that here in a second. The Guardians absolutely have to sweep this weekend for a lot of different reasons. Starting with, this is the worst team they're going to play the rest of the year. Okay, this is a team you have to take care of business against. You don't have any time left on the calendar. You've got the Tigers coming up next, who are, trying to chase down a division as they enter the final 2-week stretch, and that's all but over. Even though the Guardians are in second place again, all but over. They're going to be aiming for finishing off this division. They love to do it against the Guardians. So it's going to be tough for you to go into Detroit and play well. Then you've got to go into Minnesota for a 4-game set that includes a doubleheader. That, even though Minnesota's not great, that's going to be tough. You're on the road, and you're playing a doubleheader. And you only have one. You do have an off day after this White Sox series, which will be important. But what's going on at the same time is that the Mariners are playing the Angels. And right now it's 4-4 in the 6th inning. So it is a tie game. And a lot of hope for the Angels to help the Guardians out. But the Mariners, after this, they play Kansas City. So you need Kansas City to rebound, which may or may not happen. Hopefully they'll get some guys healthy and they'll be better. You need the Mariners to rebound. The good thing you have about that stretch is that the Mariners are going on the road. They're going to KC and they're going to Houston. They have not played well on the road this season. Houston's going to be a tough one because they're battling for the division right now. So if the Angels are not going to help the Guardians out in this 4-game stretch, the Guardians have to sweep the White Sox in order to keep pace. Because if you lose 2 or 3 in Detroit, you're hoping the Mariners will also have a hard time on the road, and at least you're keeping pace. And if the Mariners somehow lose some games to the Angels this weekend, you've got a sweep against the White Sox to lift you up a little bit, give you a little bit of help, because they haven't been getting a lot of help. They swept the Cardinals when they got back at home, And this Angel series is at home too. So the Guardians are just not getting any help. Unfortunately, they have to get help where they are. They put themselves in the situation by their own circumstances and other outside factors as well. But that's where they are. And then after that, the Mariners get the Rockies. Brutal, obviously, and it's at home. So you can probably expect a 3-game sweep in that series. Then they finish the year at home against the Dodgers. The Dodgers may or may not have anything to play for that weekend. The Mariners may or may not. So it may not matter. The Guardians have the Rangers that final weekend. So this stretch right now against the White Sox and then going into Minnesota, you almost need to win all 7 of those games. I don't know what's going to happen against Detroit on the road or at home. The Rangers series may or may not matter. So now is the time. The Guardians have to sweep the White Sox, and they have to do it because it's a big start for Tanner Bybee, right? Tanner Bybee's coming off his best start in a while, 6 innings, 2 runs. I know some people were saying that wasn't a great start. We shouldn't act like it is, but it's been a tough year for Tanner Bybee, okay? And he had a good start. It was a good result. He needs to build on that against the White Sox. Absolutely needs to build on that. So it's a big start for him to finish this year strong, to not go into the offseason no matter what happens, feeling like he's got to reinvent the wheel to get better. Parker Messick, every start at this point has been a big start for Parker Messick, right? He had his Major League debut. He pitched in Boston. It's always a big one. Didn't pitch well, but it's always a big start for anybody pitching in Boston, especially that early in your career. And then you pitched in his hometown last week at Tampa Bay, and he pitched really well. And then now he's going into the Chicago series, which is pitching game 2 of a series the Guardians, I think, have to sweep. So once again, it's the biggest start of Parker Messick's career. And these are things, again, he's also putting in his back pocket, in his mental notebook, to carry into next season. Like I said in the first segment about CJ Kayfus doing the same thing, trying to keep these experiences, these moments, these lessons with him to make it not easier going forward, but something he can rely on to help him be ready for the moment. And this start, the one in Tampa Bay, and this start against the White Sox, even though the White Sox aren't a great opponent, they're better in the second half. They're going to be pesky. They're trying to work for jobs next year and build for next year. They're not going to go easily. So this is an important series, important start for Parker Messick. And you got Slade Cecconi pitching in the finale on Sunday, coming off a near no-hitter. It was a really good start for him. Obviously, he gives up a lot of hard contact. But it's a big start for Slade Cecconi. Now, luckily, the Guardians didn't nuke his pitch count trying to get the no-hitter the way they did Gavin Williams because it ended before then. But hopefully there won't be the hangover for Slade Cecconi. So this is an important start for everybody. They have to sweep the series. It's important for Tanner Bybee. Every start's important for him to pull himself out of the funk he's been in this year, both unlucky and self-inflicted, and try to put himself in good positioning. The last start was a good move towards it. It's a big one for Parker Messick. It's a big one for Slade Cecconi. You've got to sweep this series. You absolutely have to. You got Martin Perez, who's a lefty, which the Guardians have not hit lefties well this year. So guess what? The Guardians are going to roll out a lineup of, unfortunately, Kenzie Noel and David Fry and Angel Martinez, who's been better against lefties, but overall has been very bad. So you're going to get the B lineup, unfortunately, on Friday night against the White Sox. Hopefully they'll play They should play Manzardo. You probably won't see Kayfus. You should. Hopefully they'll get Gabriel Arias back this weekend. That'll help your defense up the middle. And then you got Davis Martin, who's been, solid. Andres Gomez, so I don't really know a whole lot about. But it's going to be an important series for the Guardians to sweep because they need this time right now with the way the schedule lines up for them and the Mariners. And the Rangers are in front of them. I don't know who the Rangers are playing. I can try to take a look real quick, but I don't know who they're playing. But that's, you can't. They're going to end the year against them, and then those games may not mean anything by the time they get there. So I can't say for sure if playing the Rangers at the end of the season is going to mean a whole lot. But let's see who they're playing to this weekend coming up. Looks like they're playing the Houston Astros. That you could get some help from the Astros this weekend. Oh, I'm sorry, no, they're playing the New York Mets. You could get some help from the Mets. The Mets are good. They need to win. DeGrom facing his old team, but the Mets are throwing Jonah Tong, Brandon Sproat, and Dolan McClain. Wow, the best Mets pitchers are going this weekend. So go New York Mets, right? Very weird. And the next week you root for the Royals. Very weird. So the Guardians need to sweep. They need some help, but they have to start with sweeping just based on the time of the year, the schedule, and the situation. All right, we're going to talk about the gap from the majors and AAA. We've talked about it before. We'll talk about how much that really is true. And also, the Guardians have a prospect that I guarantee is going to be traded and then make the majors. We'll talk about that on the rest of today's Lockdown Guardians. Stay tuned. If you took the under on Thursday because you listened to Thursday's Locked On Guardians, you are welcome. The over-under was 8 on FanDuel, and the Guardians, I told you to take under on those runs, and they did. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, if you're a new customer, you can bet only $5. And if that bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the FanDuel app. And we've seen good offers before. We've seen 150. We've seen 200. I've seen 250. I have never seen FanDuel do a $300 in bonus bets for new customers. So this is the time to take advantage and maybe bet with some free money. I would go on to FanDuel and I would say, if you're new, find a bet that's got really, really good odds that you can cash in on. It doesn't even matter if you make money on that, because guess what? If you're a new customer and that bet wins, boom, you get $300 to play with on the app, and you can turn that into more. So be responsible about it, but go on to FanDuel.com as a new customer. Find yourself a really solid $5 bet, and if it wins, you can have some more responsible fun down the stretch of the baseball season as well as the NFL season. So if you're ready to play, go to FanDuel.com, visit the FanDuel app right now to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your very first $5 bet. All right, before we get into the gap between the Triple-A and the majors, I want to talk about two prospects. First, we'll talk about Travis Bazzana. We know that he left the game on Thursday in the, I think, 5th inning. He had 2 at-bats, struck out twice. We don't have any more info on that. I'd be very surprised if he was coming up to the majors. I just don't see it at this point. I mean, if Gabby Arias has to go on the IL, maybe he doesn't come back. Maybe, but I think it's pretty unlikely. And the reason I say that is because the Guardians said the reason that Travis Bazzana is not playing in the Arizona Fall League this year is because he's going to go home to Australia, because he was back in Arizona on his rehab assignment when he had the oblique issue, and they just didn't want to push it more with him. And the guy wants to go home. You know, he lives far away from his home country, so I get that. And the only reason I really would have wanted Travis Bazzana to play in the Arizona Fall League, for missed reps this season from the oblique issue, is because he needs reps on defense. Offense too, but to me it's the defense. Travis Bazzana, if he's not playing in the Arizona Fall League, he'll debut as a second baseman. And I've been kind of thinking lately about the value of second base defense and how important it was with Andrés Giménez here and how well Brian Rocchio has played at second base. Travis Bazzana, no matter how hard he works, and I know he's going to work hard, I don't think he's ever going to get to the level of Andrés Giménez or even maybe Brian Rocchio. And the Andrés Giménez level of defense is probably a little unfair, but that's just how it is. I think second base defense is really important, and I don't think Bazzana is ever going to get there. I think you're hoping for adequate with him, league average defense. So playing in the AFL in the outfield or playing in instructs in the outfield, I think would have been important for him if he is going to have an impact as an outfielder next year. Maybe he had a chance as a center fielder next year. I would have loved that. But I don't think the fact that he's not doing it in the Arizona Fall League tells me that it's going to be as a second baseman. So we'll see. But I am seeing the value in second base defense right now, and it scares me a little, but we want the bat with Travis Bazzana, and we want it to be good. So the time off will be good for him, and he'll go to Driveline and work on some things we know as well. So we'll see what happens there. There's another guy pitching in the Arizona Fall League that we talked about a little bit, but we didn't really understand why he was pitching there. That's Trenton Denholm. And the reason he's doing it is because he's developing a new pitch. And unfortunately for him and the Guardians and their fans, that new pitch is going to get him traded, but it's also going to get him to the majors based on history. So Trenton Denholm is working on a knuckleball. He's been working on it, and he's going to go in the Arizona Fall League and use it and see what happens. I'll be interested to see if the Guardians decide to put him on the 40-man roster if it's good enough, which makes sense for Denholm. He's a control specialist who tops out in the low 90s and has been trying to push his way to the majors, hasn't quite got there. He is going to get there if this knuckleball is good, because the Guardians, last 2 times they've had someone in their system throw a knuckleball, they have made the majors. Now, they haven't had a major leaguer throw a knuckleball since Tom Candiotti in the early 90s, but they have had 2 prospects in the last 15 years throw a knuckleball, and both those guys made the majors. However, they didn't make it with the Guardians. I'm going to give you a few more seconds to comment or say it out loud on your radio or on your phone, or tweet me or whatever who it was. I'll tell you why. So the last two guys to do it were Matt Waldron, who was part of the Mike Clevenger, Joey Cantillo, all those trades to San Diego. Waldron was just learning his knuckleball when he got traded in 2020. And it took him 4 years to make it to the majors. He had a good rookie debut and hasn't been as good since, has had some injuries too, but he had a good rookie debut. The guy before that was Stephen Wright, who got traded to the Boston Red Sox for Lars Anderson, not the drummer, although the drummer might have been just as good at baseball as the first baseman. I remember being very upset about that trade. Stephen Wright had to reinvent himself as a knuckleballer, had to go back down to the lower minors and come back through. But he made it to the majors not long after as a knuckleballer. Now he had some other off-the-field issues that kind of pushed him out of baseball. And that's on him. But the Guardians, the last two knuckleballers they've had made the majors, but unfortunately they traded them before they did. So you can bet now that A, Trenton Denholm is going to make the majors, but B, it's going to be for another team. So congratulations to Trenton Denholm, I think. Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about the gap between the majors and the minors to wrap up today's show, specifically AAA and the majors. And I think it's interesting that we've talked this year about how the gap continues to get bigger, right? We say it just continues to get bigger. And actually, the data shows it doesn't. So Clay Davenport, who used to be a part of Baseball Prospectus, I think he's one of their founding members, or at least was there very early on in a lot of their things. Does a lot of projections. Great website. Does a lot of Major League, minor league equivalency data. Ran a study going back to 2001 to show what the actual gap is between the majors and the minors. And actually, it hasn't grown that much. It's grown a little recently, but from 2001 to 2005, the gap between the majors and the minors in terms of batting average was a loss of 41 points. Pretty significant. 2006, 2010, it was a loss of 40 points. From 2011 to 2015, it narrowed a little bit to 39 points. 2016, 2019, it narrowed to 37 points, so it got even smaller. He didn't measure the COVID year, because obviously, this year, from 2021 to 2025, it is back to 40 points. Now, I know we're using batting average because it doesn't have OPS. We can look at slugging. Slugging is the biggest one. Hitters making their major league debut from 2001 to 2005 from AAA lost 95 points on slugging. The next data point, 90. 86, 86, 99. So we're seeing a huge gap the last 4 years of power dropping off at the major league level, which makes a lot of sense. Now, I will say the study doesn't take into account things like where baseball has been the last couple of years in terms of pitch mix, sequencing, guys throwing harder, guys throwing more breaking balls, doesn't account for park factors. But it's interesting to show that we were narrowing the gap before COVID and the gap year, and it's going back up. And it doesn't surprise me it's going back up because we've eliminated a level of the minors. We've lopped off a bunch of prospects or roster spots that could have been used by guys who were hanging on that had major league experience, and now we're hanging on to older prospects that have no major league experience that aren't as good. But the one thing that's also interesting about the study, too, is that younger players actually lose less points on their batting line in the majors than older players. I think that's really fascinating that it's not a huge gap, but we are seeing that guys who are promoted at younger ages from AAA, and this might have to do with level of talent, younger players who get promoted obviously get promoted because they're good, right? That's why they get really good, or that's why they get promoted. But it's interesting that younger players, when they go up, they lose a little bit less on their batting line. So there's a bunch of numbers in here you can look at. I can link to the article if anybody's interested. I'm just kind of going through some of the data while we're talking. But yeah, a lot of guys who are promoted younger, are not losing as much gap on their batting line as older players. And again, I think that has to do with, how good you are at a younger age. I think that's really, really important. So yeah, go check out that article. It's really interesting. With the gap not as big as we thought. It's about as big as it's ever been. And I think I'm not surprised it's going back in that direction. But age 20 to 23, the average average was lost a little bit less than a jump in older players. So younger prospects can still translate a little bit better and carry that with them. That's why you're seeing guys like Jonathan Rodriguez, who's a little bit older. It's not carrying. Will Wilson. Kayfus, it hasn't carried as much. But Jackson Holliday has been one of those guys that hasn't carried a lot for either. So some of that's random, but the gap is still pretty big. But younger players lose less of their batting line, and I think that has to do with overall talent. So that is not necessarily when you're promoted, but I think it's the guys that get promoted younger happen to be more talented, and that's why you're seeing that when the guys that are older just aren't. I don't think that's really a surprise at all. All right. Thank you for tuning in today's Locked On Guardians. We really appreciate it. On Monday, we'll be back in your feeds. We'll be talking about Guardians and White Sox over the weekend. Again, the Guardians have to sweep. Anything less, I think, is not a failure in terms of their team, but it's a failure in terms of the season at this point because they need it. So we'll talk about how that goes on Monday. We'll talk about some more minor league stuff because the Hillcats are moving on to the next round of the playoffs, so we should see more Joe Yoki and the rest of those guys in Lynchburg. The captains are done. They lost, so we'll talk about that. And Akron is playing their final weekend as well for the season, so we have a lot more Ralphie Velasquez to talk about, and Angel Hanau, all those guys. So we'll be back on Monday to talk about that. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate all of you. A shout out to the everydayers. Shout out to the commenters. Shout out to the insiders. Love all of you. Go Guardians, go. And remember, make sure you're downloading and rating and reviewing. All that stuff helps. You could use a new Apple Podcast review because I've had a couple of goofy ones lately that are dragging it down. So help us out there. In the meantime, go Guardians, go. Colin Joseph Kayfus.